I think because of the gravitas of what AI can bring to the world in terms of social impact, leaders have to be extremely humble. As a leader in this space, you have to kind of understand that you're going to have to hire people who aren't the typical employee. The other thing too, it's very important for the leadership team to hire a diverse group of people, and I really mean diverse, because if you're designing for essentially the whole world, you need to represent the whole world on the team.
Hi, I'm Mike Green, and welcome to Understanding Users, the podcast where I chat candidly with UX design and research professionals from around the world to hear about how they build digital products and services in a user-centered way. In the previous episodes, Chris, we've chatted about kind of the impact of AI on sort of design as a discipline. We've talked about kind of career journeys and potential, upskilling, professional upskilling considerations for people wanting to get into this. Let's talk a little bit now, if we can, about leadership, design leadership in particular, kind of AI teams. So, I mean, you've obviously been in various leadership positions, very senior ones in your career. How do you think leaders of the future will need to approach kind of recruiting, mentoring, managing members of AI teams, if I can put it like that?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting, and again, if I come across like I'm an expert, I am absolutely not, because there's no such thing in this space. It's still evolving. But the sort of things that I've noticed in the space are really the people who thrive and the people who really help us identify important challenges and great solutions are the people who are kind of typically not well suited to corporate environments. Corporate environments are very much kind of there's a little box that you fit into, and you do the same work every kind of day. You do it well, you perform at a high level, but it's very kind of repetitive types of work. And the people that I've found that actually help in this space are very much a different kind of mindset to that. They thrive in ambiguity. They're not frightened by not having a roadmap and not having a job description, and not knowing, how their performance review will be measured, because they're an odd character in this company. They're the people who seek out these incredibly challenging, spaces and try and figure them out for themselves. And so, they're very self-driven. They're ambitious. They are very, very intelligent. They're very empathetic. Very high EQ, and they try and network across the company to kind of gather and source information from lots of different perspectives to inform their own kind of sense of direction. And that makes them very difficult for HR and managers to kind of track. I've seen many times where managers get frustrated because this person's not, fitting into the box, and they're kind of like, oh my gosh, it's my problem child who's, too creative and all over the place. But actually, that's exactly what we need here, because you need to kind of pull in those different perspectives. In fact, I've worked with I'm neurodivergent. I've worked with, many neurodivergent people, and, they kind of engender this ability to kind of multi-process lots of different things at once and synthesize them. But they're challenging to work with, and I'm very challenging to work with, because I think about a lot of different things and ask very hard questions. And that's frustrating for some people. But that's how you get to, insights and breakthroughs that nobody else is seeing in the room, right? And so, as a leader in this space, you have to kind of understand that you're going to have to hire people who aren't the typical employee. The other thing too, it's very important for the leadership team to hire a diverse group of people, and I really mean diverse. All different backgrounds, ages, obviously gender, abilities and impairments, cultural backgrounds, financial security, all levels. Because if you're designing for essentially the whole world, you need to represent the whole world on the team. And so again, it's actually about having um, productive discourse and not agreeing on everything. We often say disagree and commit on something. And it's actually, many a time if somebody will walk into a room, you'd think there's a flaming row going on. But actually, what it is, it's actually, people advocating and defending very, ambiguous things and trying to advocate for communities in ways that they're trying to do their best. You feel like I'm here as a representative of someone, and if they were listening in on this conversation right now, am I saying the right thing to kind of defend their position in the world and their equities? And so, often hiring people who are awkward and difficult to work with is also, again, a lot of people who work in the responsible AI space are incredibly, incredibly mission driven and will say things that are quite inflammatory in meetings, right? That absolutely fly in the face of, the corporate guidelines, in quote, right? Because they couldn't give a damn about what the corporation wants or needs. They're actually there to defend these communities.
So that poses an interesting question. Like all of this is fascinating and necessary, as you say. But for a corporation which has quarterly results to announce, has a CEO and a management team who have to look at the bottom line for the survival of the organization, how do those two sort of worlds meet, or dare I
Yeah,
say, collide?
it's not easy, but it goes back to kind of what I was saying earlier in one of the previous episodes, is that you have to write down your principles and values, right? And you get everybody who's on that team to agree or disagree and commit on what those values are. And just saying a value isn't enough. You have to make it concrete. So how are we going to measure that we're delivering against this value, right? And what is an example measurement of doing no harm? Like, what does that even mean, right? So, you know, values can seem esoteric, but you have to make them concrete so that that helps take some of the heat out of the room, because everybody's on the same page and it's no longer an argument or a discussion, a debate. It's like, no, this is sort of what we've agreed to. And of course, as the world changes and cultures evolve, those norms and those values might change, and so you might have to kind of iterate on those every 6 months or 12 months or something, as you know things change, but at least that can help reduce the arguments. And by sharing those things, those structures up the chain and getting buy-in from senior leadership, that helps them understand how that team is orienting itself, right? And there is a weird tension between making money and doing the right thing, and so that goes back to questions of why and how we should use AI. Should we be using AI in social media? Is a good question. Should we be using AI to kind of manipulate what people are seeing on their screens? Right, that's what AI does. Versus, should we be using AI in healthcare to help find new drugs? Right, you can see how those are completely different kinds of scenarios that require different kinds of principles and values. So again, it's not a one size fits all AI thing, and that's the challenge with regulation. Regulations are written for all industries, and so when you look at regulation within your own industry, you kind of then have to take it another step further and really make it concrete, specific to the space that you work in.
So, would you ever go as far as to say there are certain industries, sectors, verticals that shouldn't deploy AI or should do it with a great deal more caution than others?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. No, I think the world and the sort of engineering and scientific community are waking up to those questions, and a lot of teams across a lot of companies are having those conversations around how do we build in ethics? How do we protect society? That these people are not stupid. They're very intelligent, and they're coming to these conclusions themselves, and building those frameworks in the sort of unique way that needs to be built within their own space.
Right. And kind of picking up the leadership point again, I'm interested to know if someone is, let's say, a UX manager, they're not C-suite, but they've got a team under them, and they want to start upskilling that team in AI capability. How would you recommend, not at an individual level, but at a team level, should they go about kind of starting that process?
Yeah, we did that a little bit at Meta. Obviously, there are a lot of people who work in companies that build technology that don't understand the full stack, right? And so you have to kind of start to go on a roadshow and share that information with them and show them, the kind of power and um, functionality that AI can deliver. And so I think, a nice way for teams to do it is to have everybody on the team kind of bring something that they've noticed in the world that is using AI every week to a conversation and share it and talk about it. That's as, excuse me, as simple as it gets. One of the techniques that we did too was to go through the Google training together, and set an hour aside a week and kind of go through that, and also review like things like the EU AI Act, and talk through those things so that you start to understand the definitions of these things. I think as AI becomes more technically proficient, it's going to be a lot less about engineering and software, and more about ethics and frameworks of how things think, and those things will be written to kind of for everybody's comprehension, not just the scientific community.
I'm just chuckling about a team at Meta doing a Google online training course.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you'd assume it would be kind of banned or something, but
Well, we
obviously
did
not.
it because we wanted to kind of get other perspectives, right? And so we have our own training. We wanted to see what others in the space are doing. We did it with Microsoft's work and IBM's work as well, and others. There are other smaller community, companies and non-profits that are working in this space, and we would do what we call lit reviews of their work as well. So we want to be comprehensive. And, when you're designing something that you hope will end up influencing the industry, you kind of need that context, right? You need to understand how other experts in the field are thinking about things. And, if you're at the other end of the scale where you're kind of very in the weeds and deep into this space, you're pretty much reading every single white paper that comes out. Right. So there's thousands. I mean, just in the last 6 months, I think there's been over 2,000 white papers in the AI space, which is insane. It's like normally there's maybe 15, and now there's 2,000. And you're trying to stay ahead of these concepts, and seeing how they sort of trickle down to practical applications. And what does that mean? And try, these teams, these research teams, applied research teams, are trying to figure out what kinds of use cases some of these models can be applied to, and you're trying to watch them from a distance to see how they're figuring that out.
So a very flippant, non-serious question: can't you get an AI to help you read 2,000 white papers on AI?
The funny thing is that there are companies right now, and I've worked on it myself, where AI is actually helping you build AI, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
we obviously GitHub, Copilot can do, typical software stuff, but there's definitely auto ML, where there are systems that build the ML for you. Um, and that's becoming more and more sophisticated. And I think what you'll find is that people will start to build compliance AIs that will scan your AI system to make sure you're compliant, and will make sure that the latest regulation as it comes off the press is being represented in the stack.
So is the kind of net effect of all of this then that those of us in the kind of creative design research space are becoming, more operators than curators, if you like? Is it just sort of, running kind of AI programs and letting the program do the work rather than, or the model rather do the work than having a huge amount of creative input?
I do think a lot of the roles will be more of a creative director type role, right? Where you're, or an editor in chief, where you're kind of looking at multiples of, options and deciding. I spent about 3 hours yesterday on Mid Journey creating some really high resolution images, and by the time I finished, you wouldn't be able to tell that it wasn't a real photograph. It was incredible. And I think that's going to be what a lot of this is we have that human intuition of this is the right thing. Because there's a funny meme which is like, engineers are safe because leaders can't tell them what they need, right? Right. And that's still true, even when you're the engineer or you're the designer, right? You even don't know what you're designing until you kind of get to a point where you're like, okay, this feels like it's the right thing now. But there's no like hard line there where it's like, oh yeah, I checked all the boxes and this is perfect. It's not mathematics. So I think definitely will be more creative directors. The scary thing for that is the atrophying around being truly creative and inventive yourself. And that might wane as we get these things get easier to use, and so we're going to have to find ways to kind of maintain that inventiveness.
And yeah, but artists and inventors themselves are turning to kind of AI as a new kind of a medium, right? As
That's
a new way
right.
of exploring kind of artistic expression.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I do feel like from that perspective, like from a creativity perspective, this is going to, it's like steroids for creativity. There's going to be a series of new products that are coming out in the next, you know, 24 months that are just going to revolutionize the creative industries to the likes of which you've never seen before. And it's going to make everybody an artist, right? A creator in some way. And what is interesting with that is when you build those kinds of things, you also want to build ways for people to monetize the things that they're creating, right? And so hopefully somebody's thinking about that too, where there's like net new marketplaces that help you benefit from the work that you can now, because we can flood the market with thousands of images now, but they're all mediocre. Who cares? You want to get, it's still about getting to that amazing image or that amazing piece of music or whatever that thing is that you're creating, and being able to see the value difference between that and just the mediocre.
So, final question then, Chris, on this kind of design leadership space. What skills do you think kind of these leaders of teams working on language models on AI will need to develop to be successful? Kind of what will make a successful leader? And to what extent is that similar to the current, metrics for a good leadership or not?
Um, I'm not an expert, but I think because of the gravitas of what AI can bring to the world in terms of social impact, leaders have to be extremely humble, and they do have to place themselves in a position of really designing, for the edges of society first, right? So those historically marginalized, communities, that has to be the focus, especially in social spaces. Because if you can design it for them to benefit, then you'll bring obviously the rest of the world along with you. So it's about trying to advocate for those groups. It's really making sure that the team that's working on that is considerate of that, and that nobody is being trampled on in discussions or debates. Egos are left behind, creating flat environments where the team that works on that is truly flat. I've definitely seen in my time, the sort of more verbal leaning team members tend to kind of suck up the air time and leave others in the room, not being able to get across their point. Maybe they're a little shy or something, and that's fine, but that's not okay. And as a leader, you need to make sure that you're really making a safe space for everybody to speak. I think that's probably the most important trait, actually, is to build a very trusting environment for your team. We created this isn't new, but we created user manuals for our team at Meta. So ways to work with Chris, which ways does Chris like to learn? When he's in a conversation, how does he act? What makes him defensive? What are the triggers? How can you work with Chris in conflict? All those kinds of things, right? And even doing that for yourself is really hard to do, right? It's really hard to write down and share with a colleague, like, this is what triggers me, and this is where you can see me going off a cliff and I'm not very productive, and being open and honest about that is very challenging. But if we
and vulnerable, right?
very
It requires
vulnerable,
a huge amount of vulnerability.
very vulnerable, and but only by doing that can you get to a place where those people can really feel safe enough to have that flaming row with you about the fact that you're making a stupid, decision that could impact communities in a negative way, right? And they have to be able to say that in a way where they're not fearful of their job, right? Because they know that you trust them implicitly. You might disagree vehemently, but they have to be able to speak their mind in that way and defend in that way. And so you do have to become that vulnerable with them. And you have to build a space where that vulnerability isn't then weaponized against you or them, right? And so you write ground rules as a team of we're in building this user manual for each of ourselves, and here's the rules, and we'll never step over, and we'll never use what's in the user manual as a means to kind of manipulate someone. And that's how you kind of have to get to that. And then everybody in the room is the able to share freely great ideas, stupid ideas, whatever. And oftentimes, somebody might think that they have a stupid idea and it's actually genius, but they've been too shy to kind of really bring it forward. And now that you've created this safe environment, that little post-it note sticks on the wall and you're like, whoa, where did this come from? This is an incredible idea. Why isn't, and that's the only way to get that out of the people in the room.
So that's fascinating, and what you're saying is obviously not exclusive to kind of AI teams. I mean, arguably, this is organizational cultural change that has gone on in some organizations more than others, but needs to be done. This kind of safe space, psychological safety, ability to be vulnerable. Arguably, any kind of group of people working together should be able to manifest that, but don't. So there's an opportunity here for.
Imagine that we hire you at a large tech company, and you've grown up in poverty your whole life, right? And you come into a room, and there's two dozen PhDs from the highest universities in the Western world in the room, and that's the expectation for you to be able to speak as freely and openly in front of those other people. That's an immense amount of pressure, right? Immense. You are so you feel like you're out of your own depth. Imposter syndrome is horrific. And you have to put yourself in that person's mindset of they're coming from a completely different place from you. And this is not normal. Standing with all these people is not normal for them. And so and it takes time, right? It's not going to happen overnight. It might take, 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years to get them to get to a place where they're finally comfortable in sharing their true values and opinions. And so as a leader, you have to create that framework that helps them, ease into that as efficiently as they can. you can't rush them into that. You can't say, by 3 months, I need you to be speaking. That again, I've had managers tell me that, and it's like, give me a break, right? It's like, that's not going to happen. Like, people take their own time, and you have to, get out of the office, do, offsites, build that rapport. And sometimes you're going to find that there are people who just don't want to engage in that way, and that's also fine. And you have to respect that, right? There are not people who want to go for dinner after work. They've had enough, or they've got other things that are more important in their lives. And that's also part of this too, where it's like, well, this person doesn't turn up for the team events, and that can start to impact their performance reviews, which is ludicrous, right? It's people should be able to live however they want to live. We have 40 hours of their time a week, and let's try and make it as productive as we can, because as these systems get more intelligent, those values are going to become much more important.
Yeah. And a final question for you, Chris. What message of hope or reassurance would you give to, the AI skeptics or those fearful of this brave new world that's rushing towards us?
Well, I know many of those people. I have many of them in my own family. Change is inevitable in society, and this won't stop, right? There's really no way to put the genie back in the box. There's been lots of discussions around pausing AI and things like that. I do think slowing down, going from research to public launches is probably a good thing to think about, because we haven't tested these things at scale. And also the way that they've been built in the first place hasn't been, ethically considered from every angle. When you scrape the entire internet to train your model, that's not cool. There's definitely things that I think the industry is still struggling with that can improve, but I definitely think AI is probably the most sophisticated tool humans have ever made, and it's gonna really help us with some of the most intractable problems that we've ever faced.
That's a wonderfully positive message to end on. And just a big thank you for a really fascinating series of conversations. I really appreciate you coming on. And I've learned an awful lot, and I'm sure those listening will have learned an awful lot as well. So thank you again.
It's been a pleasure, Mike. This is such an interesting topic. And, every day there's like a new piece of news. I feel like I'm very blessed to be working in this space.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Understanding Users. If you enjoyed what you heard, do please like or comment wherever you're listening, and feel free to share this episode more widely. And feel free, of course, to drop me a line with any feedback via LinkedIn or my website, researchable.uk. Join me again next time when I'll be sharing some more insights from digital design professionals. Until then, stay safe and stay user-centered.